Let's start with the summary of episode 17. In episode 17, we started by looking at what needs to be contemplated. So what do we contemplate? We need to know what to contemplate, otherwise we wouldn't know what to do when we close our eyes to do meditation. And then we looked at Samyukta Nikaya 2, one of the very, very important sutras, which is Nibbhana Sutraya. Nibbhana is another word for treasure. So we looked at the treasure. What was the treasure? In there it was saying Ananda, when one spends time enjoying asada and seeing the pleasure, it will increase Trishna. So what are we trying to do? We are trying to decrease the Trishna and get rid of Trishna totally. So this is not what we should be doing. If we are doing this, that's wrong. So that's what we understood first. How it was explained was Evameva ko ananda upadaniyesu dhammesu asadanu passino viharato tanha pavaddati. Tanha pacca upadana, upadana pacca bhava, bhava pacca jati, jati jara marana soka parideva eva metassa kevalassa dukkha skandhassa samudaya hoti. So this is how the dukkha skandha is generated or created. On the other hand, Ananda, when one spends time seeing adinava, which is anicca dukkha anatta, it will reduce and eliminate Trishna. So this is what we should be doing, because that's what we want to do, right? Upadaniyesu ananda dhammesu adinavanu passano viharato tanha nirujjanti. Tanha nirodha upadana nirodho, upadana nirodha bhava nirodho, bhava nirodha jati nirodho, evametassa kevalassa dukkha skandhassa nirodho hoti. So this is the nirodha cycle. This is how we do the nirodha. Nirodha is nirodha, right? Then we looked at Baddheka Ratta Sutra in Majjhima Nikaya 3. There is nothing to be done for the historical 5 aggregates. The future 5 aggregates are also not something that we wish for. So therefore, what we have to look at is the Paccuppanna moment. And we understood that this is not necessarily the present moment, but it is when the raga, dwisha and moha arise. This is what need to be contemplated, right? So, because raga kayo nibbhanam, dwisha kayo nibbhanam, moha kayo nibbhanam. So what we need to get rid of is raga, dwisha, moha, not everything. So that's why we need to look and see when they arise, right? And it is the same quality that we talk about in sangha quality. One of the sangha qualities, ehi passiko. Ehi passika, dhamma qualities, sorry. Ehi passika, right? Eliminate at the time it arises, right? And watch out, not every moment, but Paccuppanna moment where you deal with defilements. Then we looked at Pabhasara chitta, Prabhasara chitta. It's the same thing, the pure chitta. Pabhasvara bidam bhikkhave chittang agantukehi upakilittehi upakilittang. So the first thought is pure. So that's what we understood, and that is why we have the option of keeping it clean or pure. If it was defiled already, then we can't do anything about it. So that's why we need to understand the first thought, right? And in the Pabhasara Vagga, Anguttara Nikaya 1, they were talking about tam asutavanto putajjano yatabhutang napajanati tasma asutavanto putajjanassa chitta bhavana natti vadamiti. So natti vadamiti, I am not going to tell them. That's what it means. To who? The putajjana. Because yatabhutan napajanati. So they don't understand, that they haven't comprehended dhamma. Hence why it's no point teaching the chitta bhavana. On the other hand, pabasara bidam bhikkave chittam agantuke upakilitte upakilittan tam sutava arya savako yatha bhutang pajanati tasma sutavato arya savakassa chitta bhana atti vadamiti. Atti is yes, nati is no, right? So for the Sutava Arya Savaka, which is a noble person, Tathagatayan Vahanse is going to say, yes, practice this chitta bhavana, and there is a chitta bhavana. It's no point telling the Puthajjana about chitta bhavana because he is not going to be able to understand it, right? Then we looked further into Pavassara Vagga, saying the first thought is pure, then comes the immoral thoughts, and then comes the moral thoughts. We looked at how the creation of the chitta, and we looked at the abhyakruta paticca sampadaya, right? In Abhidharma Pitake 1 paticca sampada vibhange, we looked at katame dhamma abhyakruta. It's asking what is abhyakruta. Yasmin same kamavachara kusalassa kammassa katatta uppacchitta vipakang uppannang hoti upeka sahagata ruparammana upeka sahagata ruparammana. So the rupa is upeksha sahagata, upeka, that is neutral. Tasmin same sankara pacchaya viññānam. It starts with sankara pacchaya viññānam. There is no avidya. Viññāna pacchaya namam. No nama rupa, it's namam. Nama pacchaya chattayatanam. There is no salayatana. Talking about chattayatana. Chattayatana pacchaya passa. Passa pacchaya vedana. Vedana pacchaya no tanna, no upadana. It's bhava. Yeah. So this is the avyakruta paticca sampade. No avidya, no salayatana, no tanna, no upadana. So that is the pure mind. It's not defiled at that time. When it's avyakruta, even the Arihatun Vahanse has that. There is no upadana, no tanna, no avidya. Right? Then after some time comes the avidya, trushna and upadana. Right? Tatta katamang sankara pacchaya viññānam yan chittam mano manasa chakku viññāna dhatu. What is sankara pacchaya viññāna? We looked at what is sankara pacchaya viññāna, chakku viññāna. So because even the Arihatun Vahanse has the pancha skandhaya, the 5 aggregates are there. So there is nothing wrong in the 5 aggregates because there is nothing you can do about it. It's all about the 5 clinging aggregates, which are the pancha upadana skandhaya. That is the abhisankara process. That is what we need to worry about. Then we looked at tanha akka. What is tanha akka? Is tanha, you because of tanha you fall into the lower side. Tanha kaya is falling into the lower side. So tanha akka is not falling into the lower side. So that is what we need to be doing. Tanha kayo virago nirodho nibbānanti. Right? Then we looked at the na chetana karniya sutraya. Na chetana, no chetana, in other words, right? There is nothing to do with chetana because it happens automatically. What happens when you are in a priti state? Priti manasakayo passaddati, passaddakayo sukhandeti, sukino samadhyeti. You don't have to forcefully do anything. Once you get to the priti, then priti sukha ekagrata, that happens automatically. So what you need to do is just take your mind away from the world. So that is raga dwisha moha. When that happens is when the priti, the proper priti or the happiness comes in. When the happiness comes in, you feel the real happiness. Then comes the sukha, the pleasure. That's how it happens. There is nothing to do with chetana, because chetana is abhisankara, right? So that was what we discussed in the last episode. Now we are going to start episode 18, Lucas. So episode 18, first we are going to look at pabassara chitta, the application. Actually it's the application of paticca samuppada. This is very very deep, but this is what we need to know. This is what everyone needs to know. It's not about knowing the words. So if someone knows, okay, avidya pacca sankara viññāna nama rupa salayatana passa vedana tanna upadana bhava jati jara marana soka parideva dukkha domanasa, that's not what is needed. So those are just words. It's the application that is needed. So you need to know how it works, how you stop the process of abhisankara, how you stop the tanna, upadana, bhava. So this is what we are trying to learn here. We did discuss the same topic before, but this is the same thing again, maybe in deeper detail, right? So if you were there for the previous one, it will help you to understand further, hopefully, right? So the first one is pabassara chitte. So this is what we were talking about in the previous one as avyakruta paticca samuppada. So what happens is, you have chakku, the eye is there, and you get in contact with a rupa, which is the vision, right? Paticca to seeing process. There is a paticca, but this paticca is not paticca with tanha. It's not paticca with raga. It's not raga paticca. It's just paticca to seeing process or to identify. So at the time of identifying, there is no avidya, right? It's sankhara without avidya. It starts with sankhara, right? Then how the viññāna works is chitta, mano, manasam. So this cycle goes on and on and on. Chitta is when it's the first thought. Then mano is the measuring. Manasam, once you measure. So when you see something, it happens so fast, so you can't understand how it happens. But initially what happens is, it measures, okay, the height and the distance and everything, it measures one by one, and then take all the details, and then manasang, sang is accumulating, right, putting it together. So that is what manasang is. Hadayang is you get into identifying it, kind of thing. Pandarang is making it stronger. So it's the first, when it's hadayam, it's just very light. So you can't really, it's not a proper thought. It's not strong enough to identify as such, right? Now you make it stronger. Pandaram, mano, manayatana. So now you use the mind, right? And then you make it ayatana, an institute, to process this data. And now mana indriyan, now it becomes an indriya, right? Mana indriyan, and then indriya is a faculty, right? And then viññāna, then becomes a viññāna, then becomes the viññāna kanda. So that's how it becomes chakku viññāna, right? That is the process. And then happens the nama. Nama are Vedana, Sanya, Sankara. There is no material formation because you are just identifying. Here the chakku is an institute to seeing process. There is no raga or dwisha or anything, right? Then rupa sampassa. This happens to even Ariyatun Wahanse. Then rupa sampassa, then rupa sampassa ja vedana, and then bhava. Bhava is the seeing process. You just see something and then you identify. So that is the cycle of identifying with a prabhasara chitta or a pure mind, pure chitta, right? So now moving on to the next one. Now we are going to look at a raga chitta. So now it's all yellow. Let's try to understand why it's yellow. Because raga, when we looked at the auras, raga is to do with yellow, right? So now what happens is, the same rupa, now the avyakruta has gone through a couple of times, the avyakruta cycle has gone through a couple of times. Now comes a raga chitta with the avidya. So this starts with avidya, right? So with the avidya it starts, and then raga chitta, raga mano, raga manasam, raga hadayam, raga pandaram, raga mano manayatana, raga manindriyan, raga viññānam, raga viññāna kando. So that's how it's, so it will be, everything will become raga now. And then comes to the raga nama rupa. So this is where the material formation is done. So it is lustful material formation, and it emits yellow aura. So that's how the yellow aura is emitted, right? Here the chakku is an institute to not identifying. Now it's the process raga chakkayatana, right? And then Rupa raga sampassa, rupa raga sampassija vedana, rupa raga tanha, rupa raga upadana, raga bhava. Viewing lustfully. Now it's what they were explaining in the Nibbhana Sutra. So now you're looking at it with raga. Viparinama dukkha. You're creating the viparinama dukkha in the process as well. This is the gratification, right? Now moving on. Now what happens is, say for example this lady, okay, so this man or boy walking on the road, and then she came inside. Say she came inside, now her mother called, what are you doing, come inside, right? And then all of a sudden the raga chitta disappeared. There is no raga anymore, right? Now it's just the seeing process again. It's also called the ceasing of gratification. Now the gratification is finished, it's done for the moment, right? And then it's the same as avyakruta as before, the same thing, chitta mano manasam hadayam pandarang, and then come to the nama again, and then it's an institute to seeing process, rupa sampassaja vedana, and then the seeing. So this is where we should be. If we are on here, there is no problem. The problem starts when we attach with raga, right? So now let's move on to the next one, which is dwisha chitta. How the dwisha chitta is created. Now say for example this person, the same regarding the same person, this lady got a phone call from her friend or something, and then got to know that this guy is not a very good person. All of a sudden, all the love that she had in the mind. And also something you need to understand here is, this guy, this person doesn't even know that this lady has created a raga in her mind. This is something very important to understand, right? So this guy is just walking on the road. This lady or this girl came out of the house and then saw this boy, and all of a sudden she was in love with him, right? And she created a raga thought in her mind. So when you think that way, you understand how silly it can be, right? This guy doesn't even know that she had created a raga thought, and then all of a sudden it's gone. Now she has created a dwisha thought against the same guy, and the guy still doesn't know what is going on, right? Now this lady heard from her friend, oh, this guy is not a good guy, don't even go near him, don't even look at him, he is a very crazy guy, he does all sorts of things, right? Then what happened is, now she has created a dwisha chitta, dwisha mano, dwisha manasam, dwisha hadayam, pandaram, mano manayataram, dwisha manindriyam, viññāna kando. Now it's dwisha nama rupa. The material formation is red. Now you are emitting the red auras because they are hatred materials, right? Now here chakku is an institute to dvesha process. Right? Now rupa dvesha sampassa, rupa desha sampassaja vedana, rupa paticca, and rupa paticca adimokka, paticca bhava, and then you created a dukkha. With the hatred you created dukkha. That's how the three dukkhas come into play as well. Right? So that's that. Moving on. Now he's gone from the mind. Now she is not thinking about this guy anymore because maybe she got busy with something else. Now again, with the chakku, there is a rupa, there is no raga, dwisha or anything. Right? Now the dwisha has ceased. Right? Now it comes to the normal avyakruta cycle. Same thing. But it's only identifying, it's the seeing. Right? So these are the paticca samuppada cycles. And then moving on to the next one is Kanda Sutra. Right? So in the Kanda Sutra, they are asking, there are 4 noble truths. What are they? Chattari mani bhikkhave arya satchani. Chattari is 4. Arya satchani, the arya satcha, are the noble truths. Katamani chattari, what are the 4? They're saying dukkhang arya satchang, dukkha samudayang arya satchang, dukkha nirodhang arya satchang, dukkha nirodha gaminiya patipadaya arya satchang. So those are the 4. Right? And then what is, in the same thing they are asking, what is dukkha arya satcham? Katamancha bhikkhave dukkhang arya satcham. What is dukkha arya satcha? The pancha upadana skandhe is dukkha arya satya. Pancha upadana skandha tissa vachaniyam sweditam. Right? So the 5 clinging aggregates are the dukkha, because that's where we create the dukkha. So what are they? The rupa upadana skandha, vedana upadana skandha, sanya upadana skandha, sankara upadana skandha, and vijnana upadana skandha. So these are the 5 clinging aggregates. Right? And moving on to the next one, which is Ayatana Sutra. Again they are asking chattari mani bhikkhave arya satchani, katamani chattari. The same question they are asking. There are 4 noble truths. What are the 4? Dukkhang arya satchang, dukkha samudayang arya satchang, dukkha nirodhang arya satchang, dukkha nirodha gaminiya patipadaya arya satchang. It's the 4 they are talking about again. And then the answer is different. Katamancha bhikkhave dukkhang arya satcha. Now they are asking, what is dukkha arya satcha? Because you can address the same thing in different ways. So that's what we are trying to understand here, right? Here, the Shadayatana are dukkha arya satya. They are talking about the Shadayatana. Shadayatana are the ayatana. So that's why it's called the Ayatana Sutra. These ayatana, because ayatana, they become ayatana with raga dvesha moha. Right? Without raga dvesha moha, they don't become an ayatana. So that's why it's the same thing. It's the creation process. It's the upadana process. So therefore, this is also the dukkha arya satcha. And it's when you look at these two, it's 2 places in the paticca samuppada itself. The first one was, we looked at the pancha upadana skandha, right? Upadana. So in the paticca samuppada, avidya, sankara, vijnana, nama rupa, salayatana, passa, vedana, tanha, upadana. Now they were talking about the upadana. The first one they were talking about the upadana. Now the next one they were talking about the ayatana, salayatana. So avidya, tanna, avidya, pacha sankara, vijnana, nama rupa, pacha salayatana. So that's a different place in the paticca samuppada. So what they are talking about is this paticca samuppada. Wherever you take from, it is the dukkha ariya satcha. So that is what we are trying to understand. So next one is Lokaita Sutraya, Anguttara Nikaya Mahavagya. Loka, what is loka? Right? They are asking about loka. Kama guna panchima. They are saying there are 5 kama guna. Those are the 5, and these kama guna, wherever the kama guna are, is where the loka is. So in other words, when you create the kama guna, as in you are creating asada. Whenever you are creating asada, you are creating the world. So that is, again they are talking about the same thing. With trishna is when you can create the asada, because the asada is created in the mind. So wherever you create the asada, that means you are creating the world for yourself. The moment you create the world, that means you have created suffering. That is also something that you need to understand. Right? Moving on to the next one, which is Dhatu Sutraya. Dhatu. By getting attached with dhatu. What are the dhatu? Patavi, apo, tejo, vayu. People create the world. Again, by getting attached. So this is the world you are creating. What you are creating is by getting attached. That is when it creates. Until then there is no problem. The moment you attach with it is the problem. Again, they are addressing the problem, same problem, which is dukkha samudaya, which is trishna or tanha. By getting rid of the chanda raga, they can overcome the world. Right? Now, moving on to next item or next thing is timelessness. Timelessness. So this time, if you talk about time, time is a unit that is created by scientists. Just to, as a unit, they have just created a unit. There is no such thing as time in the real world. Because if you take Arihatun Wahanse, to the Arihatun Wahanse, the time doesn't matter. There is no such thing as time, or he's not worried about tomorrow. Oh, I have to do these, complete these by today, tomorrow, and day after. It's like if you go to Akasha, to then you won't feel any time difference. Now, because it's day and night, it changes, and you feel like something is moving, something is going on. I have to, collect whatever I can within the given time frame. So everyone's collecting things, collecting money, collecting houses, collecting cars, this and that, trying to make the individual's pot bigger, basically, because they feel like there is something called time, and the time is running out. But it's actually it's vibrations and distances, right? So when we look at the Kanda Vagga Dutiya Anicca Sutra, in there they are talking about that, and they are explaining about that when one fully comprehends Dhamma, time will not matter to that person. So that is why Kala is the time. Kale is the time. So that is why they say akalika. You become akalika when you become Rahatan Vahanse. When you become enlightened, you become akaliko. Right? So that's about the time. Creation of, now we are talking about, we are going to look at the creation of Paccuppanna moment again, what we looked at last week, right? What is Paccuppanna moment? So when we say avidya pacca sankara, sankara pacca vijnana, vijnana pacca nama rupa, nama rupa pacca salayatana, salayatana pacca passa, passa pacca vedana, vedana pacca tanna, tanna pacca upadana, upadana pacca bhava, bhava pacca jati. This pacca, what is this pacca? This pacca is the paticca. What type of paticca? Or what is this pratyaya? So there are 24 pratyaya which we will look at, right? So let's move on to the next one. Actually, there are avidya pacca sankara. So this is, in terms of the paticca samuppada, this is the first one, which is hetu pacca or hetu pratyaya. Abhidharma Pitake Patthana Pali. In the Abhidharma Pitake Patthana Pali is explained about the 24 types of pratyaya. So hetu pratyaya, arambana pratyaya, adhipati pratyaya, anantara pratyaya, samanantara pratyaya, sahajata pratyaya, anyamanya pratyaya, nissaya pratyaya, upanissaya pratyaya. There are so many, 24 pratyaya. You might have heard about some pratyaya, and some you might have not heard about it. It's good to know about these, some of these, but you have to know the hetu pratyaya, hetu, because hetu, we talk about the hetu phala all the time, and that is the cause and effect theory that we talk about, and that is very important. You need to know this, right? So see, this is the hetu pratyaya, is what we are looking at in the paticca samuppada. And when it comes to hetu, haye etu, the six that we were talking about, right? Haya is 6. Haye etu, it's wrapped in by 6. What are the 6? Lobha, dvisha, moha, alobha, adesha, amoha. So it's explained in the in here. Root condition is that condition that resembles the root of a tree, kind of thing, right? So it's the greed, hate, delusion, and the alobha, adesha, amoha, the opposite, right? The roots are the conditions by way of root for the mental phenomena associated with a root, and for the corporal phenomena produced by thereby, right? So that's the hetu pratyaya. So moving on to the next one, which is slide 16, is now we are looking at avidya hetu pratyaya sankara, right? So now this, if you look at this carefully and try to understand, I'm pretty sure you guys got the PowerPoint presentation. It's going to be really hard without the PowerPoint presentation if any one of you guys don't have it, right? I think Lucas shared it, so try to open that. So hetu, there are the first 3 hetu are the strong 3 hetu that we always look at are raga, dwisha, moha. So that is what we look at. But the same raga, dvisha, moha can be addressed in or looked at in as 6. Alobha, adesha, amoha, lobha, dvisha, moha, right? And then if you go into deeper, it's the same thing can be seen in terms of dasa sangyojana. Sakkaya ditti, vicikiccha, silabbata, paramasa, kamaraga, paticca, ruparaga, aruparaga, mana, uddhacha, avidya, right? And then when someone becomes sotapanna, that person gets rid of the moha, which is sakkaya ditti, vicikiccha, silabbata, paramasa. So and then he gets rid of the satara apaya, right? And then he becomes lokottara samma ditti. Now this person will still have klesha kama and vastu kama. There are 2 types of kama kama raga, when it comes to kama raga and paticca, there is klesha kama and vastu kama. The vastu kama you get rid of when you becomes a sakadagami, right? And then you become anagami, you still have sakadagami, and then you get rid of the vastu kama. Then you still have klesha kama, and then once you get rid of the klesha kama, you become anagami, right? And then when you become arihat, you get rid of the rupa raga, arupa raga, mana, uddacha, avidya. So that is how you get rid of these, and this is the chart showing how it happens, right? Then when you become rahatan wahanse, what happens is you become sopadisesa nibbhana, right? So upadisesa, that means you still have your panchaskandhya. You can't get rid of the panchaskandhya until you pass away, right? So what happens is until you die. So once when you die is when you become anupadisesa nibbhana. Oh, that means that is when you get rid of all the sufferings. Until then you still have sufferings left, but they are all physical sufferings to do with vipaka, not mental sufferings. Mental sufferings you get rid of totally when you become rahatan, right? That's that. And then moving on to the next one, which is the connection between the paticca samuppada and the Four Noble Truths. So we learn about paticca, the Four Noble Truths, and say, okay, if someone comprehends the Four Noble Truths, then that person becomes sotapanna, or he comes to samma ditti. But then at the same time we say, if someone comes to samma ditti, that person knows paticca samuppada. So let's try to understand the connection between the paticca samuppada and the Four Noble Truths, right? So in the next slide, paticca patisamvida magga pali. So when jara marana, this is very important. We've been moving on to, I think we'll read this one first. It talks about when jara marana becomes dukkha satya, jati is the samudaya satya, nissarana is the nirodha, and knowing nissarana is the marga satya. So what happens is, in the paticca samuppada cycle, it works. When you go to the next slide, you will see properly jara marana, moving on to samudaya satya, and then jati. When jara marana becomes dukkha satya, it becomes jara marana becomes samudaya, and then again when upadana becomes dukkha satya, right, the one before, which is bhava, becomes samudaya satya. When tanha becomes dukkha satya, right, no, it's the other way around, sorry. When vedana becomes dukkha satya, passa becomes samudaya, right? So it's the other way around, the paticca samuppada working the other way around, right? So moving on to the next one, which is Maha Tanha Sankhya Sutra. This is the slide 20. Maha Tanha Sankhya Sutra. Vijnana is a pratyaya. Katamang tam sati vijnananti. Sankara pacca vijnana. Vijnana is not something that will take you through the sansara. Okay, what happens is, here this one of the theorists comes into he approaches Tathagata Vahanse, and he is saying, yeah, this vijnana is what takes you everywhere. So he is talking about vijnana is the problem. So vijnana is, then Tathagata Vahanse stops him and says, no, this is not right, don't say that again, kind of thing. He's saying, yes, you don't say things like that. What he's explaining is, vijnana is a result, basically. So you have to understand that as a hetupala. or a cause and effect, rather than you say, oh, vijnana is what is taking everywhere, vijnana goes from one body to another, this and that. So that's not the case. It's how it happens is avidya pacca sankhara, sankhara pacca vijnana. So that's why we need to look at the samudaya and the dukkha, right? So because of avidya, it happens not because of when by the pratyaya, right? So with the raga, dwisha, moha, avidya, pacca, sankhara. That is how it happens, right? Moving on to the next one. I'm going a little bit fast because we have about another 25 more slides, right? Noble truth in another version. So Noble Truth in another version, Mahavagga-pali Anguttara Nikaya, saying although there are so many arguments, there are 18 things that everyone would agree on. Now Tathagata once is saying, because there were so many people with so many ideas, so many different ideas, they were arguing about so many things, but there are 18 things that any person with a normal brain would understand. So the 18 are these. When one sees something, it is either desirable, undesirable, or neutral. When one sees from the eyes, it's either desirable, undesirable, or neutral. Again, when one hears something, it's either desirable, undesirable, or neutral. When one smells something, one tastes something, one touches something, one thinks about something, it's either desirable, undesirable, or neutral. So these 18 things anyone would agree on. There is nothing other than that, other than these 18, because there are 6, and from the 6 senses it's either desirable or undesirable, or you don't like it, or it's neutral, right? So why we are looking at this is, when we understand this, then we get to know how to tackle this problem, right? In the same one, the cycle works according to how one paticca with. So this, what happens is, when one attaches with raga or with desire, right, then the nama rupa, so the whole cycle becomes raga, the paticca samuppada cycle. So if it is dwisha, then the whole cycle is dwisha, it becomes red. If it's raga, it becomes yellow, right? So that's what we are trying to understand. So that's how it happens. So wherever it starts with raga, it ends with raga. If it starts with dwisha, it ends, the whole thing goes with dwisha and ends with dwisha. So for example, right, sometimes when say everything was good in the house, and all of a sudden say the man in the house, or the dad, shall we say, get angry with the mom for something. All of a sudden everything changes, the whole mood changes of the house, of the place, right? Say they were watching a movie, everyone sitting around watching a movie nicely, and all of a sudden he goes, no, shut the TV off, and everyone, and then even if the kid comes talking to the dad, no, go away, kind of thing. So the mood changes all of a sudden. That's because when it goes through raga, or when it goes through dwisha, it goes through the whole thing. So everything changes. So that is what the next thing that we need to understand, right? And if someone is going after asada, so the next thing is, if someone is going after asada, then that person is creating himself a suffering. So that's only if someone is going after asada is when, because that's when the person creates the world. So that's when there is a suffering. If you are not creating, if you're not going behind asada, then you're not suffering. The moment you start going behind asada is when you start suffering, right? Now moving on to the next one, characteristics of noble sangha. In the Aniccanupassī Sutraya, it's talking about Ahuneya Sattime Bhikkave Puggala Ahuneya Pahuneya Dakkineya Anjali Karaneya Anuttaram Punyakettan Lokasa Katame Satta. So they're asking about what is this? What is this Ahuneya Pahuneya Dakkineya Anjali Karaneya kind of thing? So this we talked about when we talked about the qualities of sangha, but we'll discuss again. Ahuneya, Ahu, you came to the Nyaya. Nyaya is the concept. You came to the concept, or as in you understood, you came into which is called the Sammaditthi. Pahuneya, Pahuna, you are bonded with it now. Yeah, Pahune Dakkineya, that's when you saw it. Because when we talked about these qualities, we came from the 24th one reverse, right? So that's why you see the Dhamma. So Dakkineyo, Anjali Karaneyo. Anjali Karaneya is when before you listen to the Dhamma, you were like about to, even fight for anything, right? You were about to go after anyone, anything, do anything kind of thing. But when we get to, when you got to this state where you understood the Dhamma, then you understood, no, it's no point going behind. So now it's Anga Jalikara. So now you're not, into a fight as such. There is no game, as in I'm talking about 10 immoral activities to win from. You're not going to go behind doing all the 10 immoral activities. Even if you have to do something like that, you wouldn't be doing, you wouldn't be happy to do it, right? So that you come into, and then Anuttaram Punyakettan Lokasa means you created the Anuttara Punyaketa, which is like you created the background by listening to Dhamma and creating the mental background and everything, Anantara Samanantara Pratya, in order to get to this state kind of thing, right? In very briefly. So moving on to the next one. So this is a chart showing, this is the summary of everything that we discussed about the paticca samuppada and everything. So what happens is the panchaskandha world, if you look at the outer circle, which is the redistribution world, panchaskandha, 6 senses, the 18 elements or matters, right? So that's the first step, and then comes the paticca or tanha or attachments or cravings, desires, shall we say, right? Then paticca samuppada comes into play with the tanha, avidya, pacca sankara, then vijnana, nama, rupa, salayatana, passa, vedana, tanha, upadana, bhava, jati, jara, marana. That cycle goes, right? And then happens the upadanaskandha world, which is the fabricated world, or pancha upadanaskandha, the 18 defiled elements, right? And then is the asada world, gratification, sampasaja, vedana, kama, they're all the same thing, right? And then you understand, then you try to understand this thing, kayattena, aniccham kayattena, dukkham bayattena, anattang asara kattenati. So anicca, dukkha, anatta comes into this, right? And then you do the nirodha process of Chandaraga. Now you created the Chandaraga, now you do Nirodha, and then comes to Nibbhana. So this is like a summary of everything that we talked about up to here, right? Then we move on to your paticca samuppadam passati, so dhammam passati. So when you understand the paticca samuppada, that is when you understand the dhamma. So let's look at that, how it works, using different sutras and different examples, and how it works, right? So if you look at this, we are taking from this is the 29th slide actually. This is the same paticca samuppada cycle. We've taken raga upadana, raga salayatana, right, and raga avidya, and this we have moved on to the as a title. We are trying to look at this in as a summary, and then if you look at this, it's the asade adinava nissarana. So that is what we have discovered by, if you move those raga upadana and raga salayatana, and raga sampassaja vedana is the asade, right? Raga upadana and salayatana, that means the ayatana, the 6 ayatana, or the upadana is the pancha upadana skandhya, right? And then aniccanupassana is the adinava. So that is what we need to contemplate on. Nirodha is the nissarana, right? So the same thing is explained if you move on to the Sotapanna Sutraya. In the Sotapanna Sutraya, what they say is, when one comprehends samudaya attangama asada adineva nissarane of the pancha upadana skandhya, that person becomes Sotapanna. So that is what they said. So that tallies with this. It's the same thing. You've learnt, you've understood the paticca samuppada. Some aspects of the paticca samuppada is what you learnt or what you comprehended. So that is why they say yo paticca samuppadam passati, so dhammam passati. So you understood the dhamma. In other words, you understood the paticca samuppada. Right? Moving on to the next one, the same paticca samuppada cycle we are using to look at it in a different way. Now we are looking at sankhara. Raga avidya, raga sankhara. So sankhara is the sabba sankhara. Then aniccanupassana is the adinava, and you got the nissarana. So let's move on to the next one to see where it's explained that in the Thripitaka. In the Dhammapada, Kuddaka Nikaya Dhammapada, it says sabbe sankhara anicchati yada panyaya passati atanibbindite dukke esa maggo visuddhya. So esa maggo visuddhya, this is the marga of visuddhi marga. This is the root, in other words. So that is the same thing they are talking about. This is the paticca samuppada in a summary. Let's move on to the next one. Now it's the same paticca samuppada, raga paticca samuppada. Now you take the raga avidya, raga sankhara. We are going to look at it in a hetu. Hetu, the 6 hetu, lobha, dvesha, moha, alobha, adesha, amoha. Right? And then this, let's look at that, where it's explained that hetu. Where did they talk about the hetu? Hetu nirodha. Where? Sariputta Moggolana in the Mahavagga Pali Vinaya Pitaka. They talk about it in Ye Dhamma Hetu Pabhava Tesam Hetu Tathagato Aha Te Sancheo Nirodho Evam Vadi Mahasamano. When Upadissa was looking for Dhamma, he was going around, and Assaji Maharatan Vahanse, he met Assaji Maharatan Vahanse, and he asked, okay, you seem like a very, very good person, or very someone who had comprehended something. Can you preach your Dhamma, or can you tell us what your teacher preaches, kind of thing? And then Assaji Maharatan Vahanse, he wasn't a person who could explain Dhamma very well, but he said, this is what my teacher preaches. Ye Dhamma Hetu Pabhava. Hetu. Tesang hetu tathagato aha. Tesancho nirodo. How to nirodha the hetu tika. Right? Evam vadi mahasamano. That is what my mahasamana or my teacher preaches. Right? So, because these Sariputta was very intelligent, he could understand this straight away from this. Right? So, and he understood it very deeply from that, and he became Sotapanna. So, that is where it's explained about the Hetu. Let's move on to the next one, Sila Sutra. In the Sila Sutra, they say Hetu paticca sambhutang hetu bhanga nirujjati. It's the same thing. Hetu paticca sambhutang hetu bhanga nirujjati. So how you get rid of the hetu, and then that is how you get rid of the world or creating of the world. Right? Then moving on to the next one. Again, you have the avidya sankara vijnana. Now, samudaya and nirodha. We are trying to look at the samudaya and nirodha. Samudaya, raga, avidya, and raga sankara. Those are the samudaya. Ankinchi samudaya dhamma. Sabbantan nirodha dhammanti. I'm sure you've heard that somewhere. Right? So, it's the same thing. In the Mahavagga Pali, they are saying Yankinchi samudaya dhammang sabbantan nirodha dhammanti. So they are effectively talking about the paticca samuppada, but it's only as a title or very summarized version, because those days, the people who lived those days, they were very intelligent, they could understand straight away. But now we have to explain in detail, and we still don't understand. It's really hard, and we have so many concepts. It's so hard to understand, right? Moving on to the next one. Now we are going to look at it in upadana skandha. So you have asada adinava and pancha upadana skandha nirodha. So this is raga upadana. We have taken the upadana. Let's see where it's explained that in the Thripitaka. In the Silavanta Sutra. Sila Sutra. Pancha upadana skandha anicca dukkha anatta. So they are talking about the anicca dukkha anatta in the pancha upadana skandha. When you understand, comprehend that, you become Sotapanna. Right? Moving on to the next one. They are talking about jati, jara, marana, soka parideva, right? As the title, and then raga paticca samuppada. So jati, raga jara, raga vyadi, raga marana, right? Dukkha. Let's look at that in Thripitaka, in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutra, right? Says jatipi dukkha, jarapi dukkha, vyadipi dukkha, maranampi dukkha, sankittena pancha upadana kanda dukkha. So that is, they are talking about this sankittena pancha upadana kanda dukkha. It's the same thing again. They are talking about the paticca samuppada. Then moving on to chetana. They are taking raga sankara. Sankara is chetana, right? Sankara, kaya sankara, kaya sanchetana, kaya sankara, vachi sanchetana, vachi sankara, mano sanchetana, mano sankara. So let's see what where it says in the Thripitaka. This Nibbhedika Sutraya, the Anguttara Nikaya. Chetanaham bhikkave kammang vadami. Right? Chetanaham bhikkave kammang vadami. Right? Now the next one is we are looking at the nirodha and paticca samuppada and the aniccanupassa. Now, so this is what we need to do, right? This is what we are trying to do. This is what we need to be doing, and this is what we are going to look at, right? Raga avidya nirodha, raga sankara nirodha, raga vijnana nirodha, raga nama rupa nirodha. Nirodha is what we need to do. Raga sampassa nirodha, raga sampassaja vedana nirodha, Raga tanha nirodha, raga upadana nirodha, raga bhava nirodha. So this is the nirodha cycle. Moving on to the next one. Mula Pannasa Pali in the Majjhima Nikaya, yo paticca samuppadam passati so dhammam passati. Yo dhammam passati so paticca samuppadam passati. So it's the same thing that we started with. When one understands paticca samuppada, that person understands dhamma. When one understands dhamma, that person understands paticca samuppada. So there is a very strong bond between the two. So someone has, the person has to understand paticca samuppada in order to understand dhamma, otherwise it's really difficult. But when you understand dhamma, you normally understand some part of the paticca samuppada. Either you understood about the avidya or sankara or vijnana, nama rupa, salayatana, passa, vedana, tanha. So also something that you need to know is that when someone is preaching dhamma, that person has to be preaching one of those: avidya, sankara, vijnana, namarupa, salayatana, passa, vedana, tanha, upadana, bhava, jati. And the one that he is preaching, that person has to preach the four noble truths to do with that one thing. So dukkha, samudaya, nirodha, marga. So if it's to do with tanha, they have to explain tanha, the reason for tanha, how tanha is created, and how to get rid of the tanha. If it's upadana, what is upadana? What is the reason of upadana, or how upadana happens, and then how to get rid of upadana, and the route on, or the path of getting rid of upadana. If it's bhava, it's the same thing, right? Moving on to the next one. That's the same thing we looked at. And then Dhamma Vihari Sutraya. So that's Dhamma Vihari Sutra. The objective of the following Dhamma should be calming the mind. So this is also something that you need to understand. Following Dhamma, when one is following Dhamma, that has to calm the mind, and the person's objective should be to calm the mind. If someone is following Dhamma to get more knowledge about Dhamma, just to know more, that shouldn't be the objective. If someone is following Dhamma to show others that I know Dhamma more than any others, that shouldn't be the objective. If someone is following Dhamma to be able to argue with others and win against others, that shouldn't be the objective, right? Now this in here they are asking Dhamma Vihariti Bante Uchati. So what is Dhamma Vihara? They say Dhamma Vihara. So Dhamma Vihara is someone behaving according to Dhamma, kind of thing. So living according to the Dhamma. So in here, one who gets busy trying to sort problems out is not a person living with peace. So he is not a person who is following Dhamma Vihara, and he does not practice Dhamma or Samadhi. Then the next person is in the next one they are talking about one who preaches Dhamma all the time, all day, but does not practice Samadhi. He preaches Dhamma, preaches, but he doesn't practice any Samadhi, he doesn't practice the Dhamma. He is not Dhamma Vihari. The one who recites Dhamma all day, there are people who recites Dhamma. Sutra, they just say from morning till evening, they just chant Sutra. But they don't practice meditation, or they don't practice the Samadhi, or they don't contemplate what needs to be contemplated. So that is not a person who's following the Dhamma, or is not Dhamma Vihari. One learns a lot but not practice is not Dhamma Vihari. The one who learns and practices Samadhi is the one who's Dhamma Vihari. So that is what you need to understand, and that is what you need to be doing. So that is what is important, and that is what need to be done. And so that is the end of the chapter. So okay, that's actually the end of chapter, was it 18, episode 18. Don't know if you guys have any questions. It was too long, so I had to rush. Maybe I went too fast, I don't know.